What do you attribute this sudden surge in natural wines to?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because indeed everybody says natural wine is quite new. No, it's not new actually. We're just going back to how we were doing things in the past in
Right.
reality. Growing your grapes organically, so not adding anything in the vineyards, but also not adding anything in your wine to have kind of the purest wine possible.
Traveling the world to bring you delicious dishes, tasty beverages, and interesting experiences. This is the Destination Eat Drink Podcast on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
I'm Brent Peterson. Welcome to Destination Eat Drink, the travel podcast for foodies, because the best part of any trip is what you eat. And this week we're in France, Italy, the country of Georgia, and Sweden for some delicious and surprising wines. We'll find out why you can dig up good bargains in Bordeaux, what to look for in natural wines, and a delicious variety called Pignoletto from Emilia-Romagna. Plus, the surprising wines of Sweden. And I'm thirsty, so let's drink.
Destination Eat Drink.
Erwan Leo from Secret Wine Door in Paris is a wine expert. He tells me about the wine of Bordeaux and what to look for when buying a natural wine. Take me through Bordeaux a little bit, what your opinion is and what some of your favorites are.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Now, Bordeaux, so it's a wide region. Bordeaux is in the southwest of France. And it's, in general, it's blends that you're going to find. So in Bordeaux, you have two main grapes in general, I would say. So there is 5 red grapes, which are mainly found, but 2 main ones, which is Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon. And then you have 3 minor grapes, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot and Malbec, even though Cabernet Franc is a bit more important. And then on Bordeaux, what's very important to know is that there is the left bank and the right bank. So there is 2 sides of Bordeaux, depending on where you're located and which side of the river you're located. If you're on the left bank, which is actually near the sea, this is going to be wines which are in general more Cabernet Sauvignon driven, so bolder, stronger reds. Whereas if you go to the right bank, where, for example, Saint-Emilion is located or Pomerol, those are more Merlot dominated. In Bordeaux, it's mainly blends that you're going to find, which not many people know. Again, in my tasting, I get many people saying, I hate blends. My favorite wine is Bordeaux. I say, well, you don't mind blends because Bordeaux is usually a blend that you're going to find. It's just either you have a majority of Cabernet Sauvignon or a majority of Merlot. I really enjoy both sides, to be fair. For me, if you ask me on the right bank, of course, Pomerol or Saint-Emilion, those Saint-Emilion Grand Cru. And I think Bordeaux was quite pricey maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, which used to be the main French region that people were looking for. And nowadays, Bordeaux is quite in a crisis in the past few years because the attention of worldwide wine, the attention of people worldwide went more towards Burgundy, making Bordeaux less important. And therefore, they produce so much wine that they struggle to sell in some parts that they don't increase too much the prices, and you get to find very good wines for good money as well in Bordeaux.
If you're enjoying the podcast, take a moment to rate and review the show on your podcast app. It just takes a moment and it helps other foodie travelers just like you find the show. And you can support Destination Eat Drink with a one-time or monthly contribution in any amount at buymeacoffee.com/destinationeatdrink. Now more with Erwan Leo from Secret Wine Door. You know, I see a lot about natural wines, and when I was kind of doing a hobby winemaking, this was the only wine that we would make. We would never add commercial yeast to our wine. We would just, ferment it and see what would happen, with the yeast, the natural yeasts. And now natural wines in the past few years have gained incredible popularity. What do you attribute this sudden surge in natural wines to?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because indeed everybody says natural wine is quite new. No, it's not new actually. We're just going back to how we were doing things in the past in reality. It's that newer movement. It's true that I would say it's more a trendier thing right now that I would say the younger generation are more attracted to because it's also related to the environment, right? It's all about natural wines. Basically, it's about growing your grapes organically, so not adding anything in the vineyards, but also not adding anything in your wine to have kind of the purest wine possible. And in France, it's clearly growing. I would say worldwide, we see those more in the like the cooler cities. I don't know, I say that the bigger cities. You see in Los Angeles, maybe New York. You see in Paris, a lot in the northern European countries. I think that's the right way of doing wines. To be fair, this is where we should go back. However, today it's still a trend, and when it's a trend, lots of producers or lots of places, they do it not necessarily because they believe in the natural wine production, but much more they see an economical opportunity. They see people buying those for more money, so they say maybe I should go towards this. And nowadays in natural wines, you can really find all type of wines. Lots of people make their opinion by trying one natural wine that they bought in a supermarket because it says natural wine. They didn't like it and they said natural wines never again. Well, it's not fair to say that. Like if you buy those, what's good to do, I would say, is to buy those in specialized shop or specialized restaurant. I know which producer works well, which one doesn't. Like to know much more the story of the producer and how come they came to the natural wine. I think this is more important, and you find those incredible wines. And when we talk about terroir, I don't know if you heard that word before, but about like tasting really the soil and tasting where we're located. I mean, there is nothing that could be more pure than a natural wine to really taste the place where you're located, I would say. But if you buy those, be careful and go in the right places.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing about natural wine is that on a commercial scale, folks want to have consistency. Like even from year to year, they want to go and they find a wine that they like, and they go and they pick it, and then the next year they go and they pick it again. They want that same flavor, that same taste profile. And with natural wine, that's nearly impossible to do because there will be so much variation from year to year, depending on all of these, depending on all of these factors, environmental and rainfall and all these things that happen with wines. So, I think that's a really big issue that people need to understand and know that, one bottle to the next bottle could be quite different.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. But I think it's because it's kind of new. I would say that movement started maybe 5-6 years ago, maybe a bit more than that, but like really started becoming big. So it's newer and people are starting to say, I like that, but not going much further. I think with time, people will get educated towards it. It's part of education. And just starting to understand that what matters is not necessarily the wine, it's more what happened that year climate-wise, and this is why your wine has a soul. It's because it speaks words on what kind of climate you had that year, and you can really identify one that has a higher acidity. It's usually a wine which were from a cooler climate, and it was more rainfall, and like you can tell a story which is very interesting, but people need that education. It's going to come. I'm quite hopeful with time it's going to come. The quality of the natural wine is going to increase as well. And I think it's the direction in which it's going. It's just, it takes a bit of time, and some people want to go straight in there without, lacking that knowledge, I would say.
Andrea Chierici is the founder of Taste Bologna Food Tours. He talks about the wines of Emilia-Romagna. Let's talk a little bit about wine from the region. Now, we're in Emilia-Romagna, and what is the wine, the specific local wine that we should look for when we come to visit you in Bologna?
Okay. Also about this, your audience shouldn't expect to come to Barolo or Tuscany. We've always been a countryside area, so we have very simple wines. The most famous of our city is Pignoletto, which is similar to Prosecco, but don't tell this to Pignoletto producers. And it takes its name from Pigna. Pigna is the fruit of the pine because of the shape of the grape. It can be sparkling or still, and it's very good, I think, with salumi, with cured meat and cheese, and with crescentine. Much better than a red, but much better than a Sangiovese. So this is the one that is really from Bologna. Then in Modena you have Lambrusco, you have Sangiovese. In Bologna usually Pignoletto is a good choice.
There's lots more food and travel at destinationeatdrink.com. I have a brand new food and travel guide. Speaking of Emilia-Romagna, this one is to Modena, where I share the best of this delicious city, including the famous balsamic vinegar and a special flatbread, plus black walnut liqueur and the vibrant market. You can download the ebook at buymeacoffee.com/destinationeatdrink. I also posted a brand new video. This one is a hike of the stunning Cap Ferrat on the French Riviera. Not only is the scenery beautiful, there's also an ostentatious mansion, a lighthouse, and a notorious villa where a rock and roll masterpiece was recorded. Plus, snacks. Watch that by clicking on the video tab at destinationeatdrink.com or go to my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/@destinationeatdrink946. Talk a little bit about Lambrusco, because in the United States, this type of wine got a bad reputation in the 70s. And so I think when a lot of people go to your region, they hear about Lambrusco and they're like, "Oh, Riunite on ice, that's nice." You know, they don't want to try it because they think of it as a low grade wine. And I think they really need to understand that there are some great Lambruscos out there.
Yeah, I'm sorry about this, that reputation that developed around the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. But now you can find really great Lambrusco. Also, they use a Charmant method to make it, and there are really quality producers. Maybe they make small quantity, a few bottles, but they work really great. I also arrange a wine tasting with a guy that is very expert, and we did that also with John Hopkins students that has the university here in Bologna. And I'm sure we can change that reputation if you allow us to do.
Vincent Marcus is a foodie tour guide for Food Tours Stockholm, as well as a sommelier and a student for an advanced degree studying marine food systems. He tells me about the surprising wines of Sweden. Vincent, you're a sommelier, and I don't necessarily equate Sweden with wine, but tell me about your experience as a sommelier in Sweden.
Right. So this might actually shock a lot of people here, I think, but Sweden is actually a wine country. And I don't necessarily mean that from a production point of view, although I can talk about that as well, because that's happening. But Sweden is the only country in Northern Europe that consumes more wine than beer or strong spirits. I think most people think about beer, or maybe even, for example, vodka, because of Absolut Vodka, for example, when they think of Sweden. But people here drink a lot of wine. We were very early with the bag in the box, so that doesn't mean that everyone drinks great wine, but people drink kind of a lot of wine. So there is a large market for sommeliers or just working with wine in general here in Sweden. And I think people in Stockholm are very interested. In the last 20 years, there's been a large wine boom. Now I feel like you have a wine bar on every street corner, more or less. Everything, of course, from natural wine bars to more conventional wine bars. And people are really exploring new kind of parts of the world, new flavor profiles and stuff. On top of that I mentioned before, Sweden in itself is also a very quickly growing wine industry. So today, Sweden is the largest producer in Northern Europe, except for Germany and England. I think we have about 85 producers last time I looked. Most of them are quite small, but still there's some real serious investment going into viticulture here in Sweden.
It's interesting because with climate change, you may be seeing more grape growing there. You may even be growing red grapes there before too long.
Yeah, we do actually. So it's a combination of two factors. It's climate change, of course, that helps out a lot. Maybe one of the few places in the world where that's a boon to agriculture. And on the other side, we also kind of tend to not care so much about wine convention. That's strong in the rest of Europe, especially in France and Italy. So they will, for example, only use purebred Vitis vinifera, the common wine plant, whilst a lot of viticulture in Sweden implements hybrids, like in Canada or some parts of the US, where it's colder as well, which are just much more resilient. So that's the kind of direction it's going.
Fascinating. Just one more question about wine. What is the most common grape that is grown there?
So the most common grape is a grape that I think most of your listeners probably haven't heard about. It's called Solaris, and it's one of these hybrid grapes. It's actually a great grape, I think. It has a lot of these kind of Riesling notes, so very like fresh and elegant, limey, green apple, can have a lot of acidity. So a lot of producers tend to like put them on what's called malolactic fermentation. You kind of mellow out the malic acid into lactic acid to kind of soften them a little bit and things like that. So you might have to do some tricks, but a good Solaris can be a very, very nice wine.
Well, that just, I don't think I'm going to find any Swedish wine in my local Portuguese bottle shop. That just means I'm going to have to come up to Sweden and try a little with you. So there's that. Tomo from Eat This Food and Wine Tours and Megzi from Food Fun Travel are experts on the food and wine of the country of Georgia. They tell me about the fascinating history of winemaking in Georgia that goes back almost 1,000 years. One thing I found really fascinating listening to your podcast, Tomo and Megzi, was the fact that a lot of these wineries are relatively new.
Yeah.
You go around Portugal and you find wineries that have been around for 100 years, even longer. Of course, you go into Spain and Italy and France, hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's not the same case in Georgia, but there's a very, very good reason for that, right?
Yeah, that was the Soviet occupation during, after, well, it's been on and off for quite some time.
But most people think it's still going on, and 20% of the country is still occupied.
So basically, one of the things a lot of people didn't actually realize is that Joseph Stalin is actually from Georgia. He is a Georgian who was born in Gori. But that didn't stop him from destroying the wine population here. So he just basically decided that they were going to only have Cazzotelli and Saperavi. They're very robust grapes and they grow very well, and they do a lot of
high yield.
They
produce a lot of wine, so it helps them to make a lot of budget wine very easily.
So basically that's all anybody was allowed to grow, and then under the Soviet occupation the way it worked was that a certain amount had to go to Russia to supply all of their wine needs, and then only a very small amount was being able to be kept by the families. There were some people doing some, black market, trying to do their own sort of experiments and stuff, but I don't know, the penalty for being caught for doing stuff like that was quite high. So people were just basically doing Cazzotelli, Saperavi. They weren't really putting a lot of love into it, shall we say. It was just trying to be mass produced to just make wine, not to make good wine.
Winemaking was turned into a factory process to make lots and lots and lots of bulk and no interest in quality. And yeah, as Meg said, although home producers were still allowed to make their own wine and did, everyone, as they do now, was making their own wine at home. They were limited. Once they got to a certain quantity, they were supposed to donate all of it to the state, and they weren't allowed to sell it because private commerce was illegal. So as Meg mentioned, like black market would be the only option to sell that wine, or you drink it at home yourself. So the history of winemaking here is sort of different. That before the Soviet era, it wasn't really commercialized in the same way as maybe it was in Western Europe, in France.
Just made wine for their
Everyone made their own wine at home.
Village.
No one was really going out to buy loads of wine. So there weren't that many famous like exporters or producers that were producing any sort of mass scale. Until the 19th century, there really wasn't very much going on in that sense at all. Everyone was just making their own wine. So yeah, I've also been trying to do some personal research to find out some wineries that have been continuously making wine since before the 19th century. And
when
thus
did
far,
Sinandali?
Sinandali was early 19th century. So Sinandali Estate is one of the famous estates here that you can come and visit. They're still making wine now, but it was established in, I think, 1812 was their first vintage, I believe, or it was around that time. So it's been more challenging. I've been asking Georgians about it as well. And although I visited a few 17th century wine cellars, they do still exist. They're mostly sort of smaller locations or family-owned places. These were not like large-scale production or exporters particularly. So I would love to find something that we could take people to that was older than the 19th century, but we haven't. It just doesn't really exist apart from the like relics in the monasteries. And yeah, there's one monastery in Carchetti called Alaverdi Monastery. They've recorded continuously making wine since 1011 AD. Wow. So they've got over 1,000 years of wine production, which is actually one of the oldest in Europe, I believe. I don't know what the the history is in the rest of Europe. But you can't just go and visit them and go in the cellar. You can taste wine. You can buy wine outside the monastery. So it's an amazing place where you take everyone on tours there, but you can't go and see them making wine. You can't visit the cellar unless you're like the Prime Minister or something. It's quite hard to get a tasting. And the wines are very expensive as well. So yeah, doing a basic tasting, if you're one person turning up and buying a bottle of wine, you're going to be spending quite a lot to taste anything. Yeah, that's so the monasteries are sort of the only places, and they were not doing this for massive commerce either. It's still small scale production. So they don't have this sort of famous history of large chateaus or anything like that.
I need to befriend the Prime Minister of Georgia so that I can go visit that.
I've never managed to get a visit in the cellar. I'm still trying to get to visit their cellar. I hope to have friends that will get me in there at some point, but it's been a long journey to get there.
Keep working. Keep the eye on the prize there, Tomo. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about, you mentioned the Emiretti wine region. Tell me a little bit about that. Are there different grapes grown? What's the microclimate like there?
It's over the central mountain range of Georgia, which means it's towards the Black Sea, so it's heading into subtropical, a bit more humidity on that side. So you definitely get different characters. Harvest happens a bit later, sort of mid-October rather than mid-September. So it takes a little bit longer for the grapes to be ready and ripe and ready to make wine. They're known for making lighter-bodied wines, more acidic wines. The grapes that grow on that side have thinner skins, so they have way less tannins when they make them with skin contact. And they don't have quite the same sort of character as East Georgian wines, which are very heavy and tannic normally. So this side is actually, the Emirettian side is really good for first-time tasters, even though it's not that famous outside of Georgia compared to Kakheti. This region is ideal because you're going to taste something a little bit more similar to what you'd expect with a Western European white wine, even though there is skin contact. It just, strong acids, lighter flavors like wild flowers, green apple, citrus, this sort of stuff. But also still made in qvevris, often. Not always, but all the traditional production is still being made in these clay pots. So that area, I think it's great. If you fly into Kutaisi Airport, which is sort of the second airport of Georgia, then definitely spend a day in the wine region there before traveling anywhere else, because I think you'll discover something more familiar, and then you can sort of work towards the crazy, heavy Kakhetian amber wines.
And do you have a favorite winery in this region?
Oh, yeah. Bayer's Winery. It's a winery that's run by three siblings. It's two sisters and a brother, Bayer, Gvanza, and Georgi. And they just are doing a fantastic job, not only just of doing really incredible wines, but also just traveling all around the world promoting Georgian wines. They're just really great people that are promoting Georgian wine around the world, and they also make really good wines as well. Always happy to catch up with them.
Yeah, and it's small production, so they're artisan production, mostly made in qvevri. I think their production's somewhere between 40 and 100,000 bottles a year. I'm not sure the exact amount now because they have grown a lot in the last couple of years. They've been developing very fast.
Amazing work.
But somewhere up to 100,000 bottles. And by Georgian standards, 100,000 bottles is already what I call a medium-sized winery, because most of the small artisan wineries are making less than 25,000 bottles a year, and they really are bespoke product. Right. But those guys are still keeping it very close to the artisan traditions, and so even though it's a slightly larger production than the micro producers, they're definitely honouring the sort of history of Georgian winemaking, and but whilst also doing some experiments. So they got rosé now as well, which Georgians will be like, "What's a rosé? What's that for?"
And they're doing their pet nats
and pet
now
nats
as well.
and other things. So yeah, they're also being creative because they're a bit younger as well. They're sort of in their 30s, so they're newer to winemaking. I think they started about 10 years ago, but their family has been making wines for generations, and they've sort of taken those traditions and then done it their own way and done some modern twists on the wine as well.
Okay, there you go. That's Tomo from Eat This Food and Wine Tours, and Megzi from Food Fun Travel. You can reach them at eatthistours.com and foodfuntravel.com. Erwan is at secretwinedoor.com, Andre is at tastebologna.net, and Vincent is at foodtoursstockholm.se. I've also got links to all of them in the show notes. Well, that's it for this week. Next week, it's a painting with a decapitated king, gambling in a colonial tavern, and what it's like to fire a cannon in real life. as we travel the revolutionary road with Darley Newman. Make sure you're subscribed to Destination Eat Drink so you don't miss that. Destination Eat Drink is distributed by the Radio Misfits Podcast Network and Ed Silla. Thanks, Ed. I'm Brent Peterson, and I'll see you down the road.
Join us next week for another culinary adventure on Destination Eat Drink, a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.